So from age 15 to about 20, I was a drug dealer. Now, I'm not going to talk about this in a very positive light. Some of the things I talk about might be funny, they might be interesting, but overall, this is just my experience being someone in this profession. So when I was 15, I was smoking a lot of weed, and I had been smoking a lot of weed for a while. And, you get in these circles where you start, hanging out with people that sell weed, obviously, because you have to get the weed from someone who sells it. And I had quite a big social circle. So I knew a lot of people that sold weed, and they asked me if I wanted to help them sell. So that was kind of like my introduction into it. I wasn't really making a lot of money doing it. It was like you sell like a dime bag here, you sell a quarter there. And those prices range from anywhere from like 20 to like $80. So you're making like little deals on the side and whatnot. And as a 15-year-old growing up in the early 2010s, that's kind of a lot of money. I know inflation now is through the roof, so probably not a lot of money to some people, but at the time for myself, it felt like I was doing something significant. When I first started, I wasn't very good because I would sell to girls, and sometimes they wouldn't even pay me. They would be like, "Oh, can you give me, like 2 grams, and I'll pay you back, tomorrow or something." 2 grams would be like $20. So, yeah, I wasn't very good at it first, but as I got older and I started hanging out with rougher and rougher crowds, it got a little bit more serious. So I started selling ounces, and I was also picking mushrooms in a park. I was picking pounds of magic mushrooms from a park that was near where I lived, because I grew up in Washington State, and in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I was from, magic mushrooms actually grew just openly. Like you could go to a park underneath a fir tree and you would find magic mushrooms there. I'm not telling you that to go do that. I'm telling you that because that's how they grow. They grow in like these mulchy kind of foresty sort of areas, but you have to do it when the timing is right. So about once a year, or at least a certain spot out of the year, I would go and pick magic mushrooms. So I was selling weed and magic mushrooms. I wouldn't say like harmless stuff, because nothing is harmless. So you can definitely do some damage with anything. You could take a fork and stab someone in the face with it, which do not do. I guess I should say that regardless of everything I talk about, this is not this is not me promoting any of these activities, by the way. This is me just being informative about them and talking to my own personal experience. But yeah, so magic mushrooms, weed, I'm selling that. By the time I reach about 17, 18, I'm selling ounces and making, easily a couple $100 a day. And I'm usually having people sell it for me. So I would find like someone who, was fine with having people come in and out of their houses and or where they lived, and they would sell it for me because I still lived with my parents. Yeah, I wasn't. I'm telling you, it wasn't a very glamorous life. It was just stupid things that I thought I could do, having these preconceived notions of who I was and feeling more like a badass than I really was. Like I had a good family. My family had a good home, and we were definitely upper middle class for a while, but me just wanting to be something that I'm not. I did a lot of stupid things, and maybe I can touch base on some of those things here as well, since I'm talking about selling drugs. So everything was relatively harmless for a while, and I didn't have any problems necessarily. Like I got in trouble at school doing stupid stuff, and I got in trouble, with certain people. Like sometimes I'd get into a fight with somebody who, in all honesty, wasn't that dangerous overall. I would just pick fights, and I get really mad at certain people because I didn't have a very good control of my emotions at the time as well. I was going through some things, namely depression, and some post-traumatic stress disorder from some other stuff that maybe I can talk about in a different video. But as far as the selling drugs stuff goes, as it kept going, I started hanging out with more and more dangerous people. And I'll just give you an example. So one time I was selling weed to a guy at his house. A guy who was a little older than me, maybe in his early 20s. I'm not really sure, but maybe 18, possibly 18. I want to say 18 is closer. But I sold weed to him, and I knew the guy was a heroin user, that he was using black tar heroin. And one of his buddies came by. I think it was his dealer. He brought some black tar with him, and we were sitting on the couch, and the guy offered me black tar. And I said no, because there were certain drugs that scared me. I mean, at the time, I was pretty much open to using anything, but black tar, methamphetamine, things of that nature, that stuff scared the shit out of me. So I said no. And the guy took out a knife, and he was threatening to stab me if I didn't take black tar. So, interestingly enough, the way I got out of it was by basically bitching him out. Was saying like, I'm not gonna do black tar. And he thought I was a cop. He was like, if you don't do black tar, then you must be a cop. So I was like, I'm not a fucking cop. Like, I sold this guy like a dime bag. So, you know. But that's just one example. There were other ones as well. So towards the end of my, I guess you could say, 10 years selling drugs, I was hanging out in trap houses, and I guess a better way to say it would be like trap apartments, because a lot of the guys I knew that hung out and sold drugs, and, you know, obviously like and there was nothing glamorous about being in trap houses all day. I was trying to go to school. I was actually going to community college, and I was not doing a very good job. So most of my time was spent, you know, being around this drug culture. And I myself, I was smoking a lot of weed. Like, I would roll up like a blunt that would be like an ounce-sized blunt. I'd take a bunch of backwoods, or I'd take a bunch of Swisher Sweets, put them together, make these giant ounce blunts, and just smoke them. And that would literally be my day, just hanging out in a drug house with a bunch of drug users and drug dealers. And most of the time, these people are nasty. Like, they're just nasty people. Like, you go into like an apartment that's just covered in shit. Not literal shit, but like, you know, there's shit on the ground everywhere. You know, there's drug paraphernalia all over the place. Everything's dirty. It smells bad. But you would have like a lot of girls roll through. And sometimes they'd be cute, but in all honesty, like, most of the girls that like go to these kind of places are pretty trashy. You know, like, even if they are, you know, conventionally attractive, like voluptuous and whatnot, but they're trashy. Like, they'd sleep with like 5 different dudes, and they do gross things. You know, like, one girl was like, while I was coming down from mushrooms, was like licking the inside of my ear and like rubbing on my leg. And then I went into a bedroom where her sister was, who was about to have an orgy, and I was like, yo, can you get your sister off of me? She's like licking the inside of my ear. So, yeah, not exactly wife material. I mean, we all have our histories, so it is what it is, but still, though, not good. And while this was going on, my mental health was not doing very well. You know, I had these ambitions and ideas of what I wanted to be, and I think that part of me knew that was never going to come to. But I also wanted like a normal life. Like, I wanted to date people. I wanted to go movies. I wanted to hang out, you know, Netflix and chill, that kind of stuff. I didn't really care about school, but I knew that I wanted to do something creatively. Like, I wanted to write. I wanted to act. I wanted to do other things that satisfied me besides just selling drugs. But the thing is that when you're high all the time, you know, like, maybe sometimes these things are sitting in the back of your head, but most of the time you're not thinking, and you really can't think because you're in a house with a bunch of people doing drugs. You just have to be aware on a moment-to-moment base, because you don't know if someone's going to try and fight you. You know, like that guy that took a knife out on me, you don't know if that person's going to come back or something, or someone like that person is going to, try and stab you. And I got in a lot of fights. And I was surrounded by guns quite often. Like one time, this guy I knew just, blitzed out of his mind, high and drunk, was just shooting a shotgun wildly in a apartment complex. Outside the apartment complex, but in the parking lot. And you'd see a lot of trashy things too. Like I remember one time, these two girls, I swear to God, I've never seen people look more like apes than in my life. And that's not a racial thing. These were two white trash girls, but like they started beating the shit out of each other like they were apes. It started inside a 2-bedroom apartment with like over 200 people in it. They started beating the crap out of each other in the apartment. And then the fight went downstairs. And they started wrestling with each other, pulling each other's hair on top of someone's car, fucking the car up. Like the car was fucked up because they're fighting each other on it. They're just fighting on top of this car. But I guess my downfall and what got me out of all this was I actually ended up getting arrested. And I was hanging out with a friend. I was hanging out with two friends. And I was high on mushrooms with them. And there were a couple of times, like usually when I was doing mushrooms, like prior to all this crazy stuff, like when it was just sort of innocent, I could do mushrooms and have a good time. Like it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was spiritual or anything like that, but it was definitely an experience where it felt like it was more innocent than anything, kind of like a Judd Apatow movie or something like that, something harmless, even though I guess mushrooms aren't necessarily harmless. They could be harmful. We already talked about that. Anything can be harmful depending on how you use it. But the last couple of times I had done mushrooms, the first time that was really bad was I actually thought about ending my life until I went on a walk with my mom. And then the second time I was in a house, or I was in an apartment, another one of these trap houses sort of setups, and I blacked out, and I had this dream that I was a gorilla on an island with a bunch of other gorillas, and I had a bunch of bananas in my hand, and the other gorillas on this island were trying to fight me for my bananas. And when I came to, I was in my underwear. Like I was just hanging out on a couch in my underwear. And apparently, I don't remember any of this, but I had caused quite a mess while I was blacked out. I had knocked over a hookah, I humped a doorknob, and I almost punched somebody in the face. So, not good stuff. Oh, and I almost drove too. Someone had to take my keys. So, not good stuff. But the third time, the final time, and what got me out of all this was I took some mushrooms with some friends. We were going on a bike ride, and I had stopped one of my friends from getting hit by a car. And he looked at me like, why the hell did you do that? Like, why the hell did you do that? And that really affected me because here I was with two friends, people that I had thought I had formed a pretty close relationship with. And instead of this guy being grateful for me potentially saving his life, which I think I did, he was upset. I've tried thinking about why this was the reaction he had, and I think it's because he was so high he didn't realize that there was a car coming at him. But that created some distance as we continued tripping. We were biking towards this park, and him and the other friend kept biking further away from me. So I was by myself, kind of in the back. And I don't really know what happened. I just know that I stayed behind and looked at the sky, and I just thought about how it would be really nice to die, And that's kind of how I felt inside. All these feelings that I had manifesting inside me, all these insecurities and all this dissatisfaction with where my life had gone. it had reached this apex, and I blacked out. And during this time, apparently, I was trying to piss on a trail, and that wasn't a good idea because as I was on this trail, there were a lot of people coming and going. And I remember that I blacked out. I woke up. There was a guy who was like, "What the hell are you doing?" Because, my dick is in my hand and I'm taking a piss. And I black out and I come to. There's a cop. And I black out. I come to. There's 2 cops. I black out again. Now there's 5 cops. I black out again. Now 5 cops are on top of me. And one of them is threatening to break my arm. And it was about at that moment where I was still tripping for a good hour and a half after that, but I had sort of come to my senses, because when someone is, right at the cusp of breaking your arm, I guess you kind of have to wake up. So they took my ass to jail. I stayed in jail for about 2 days. And it was a long process, being on probation and having this time where I sort of got to reflect on my life, who my friends were. And at first I was just very angry, and I wanted to fight everybody, both metaphorically and physically. I wanted to fight my friends. I wanted to physically hurt them. I wanted to fight the system that had arrested me. And I wanted to get my way, because for a long time I had gotten everything that I wanted. I had been selling drugs. I had been going to parties every single day. I was having sex and with anybody that I wanted for the most part. And it wasn't what I wanted, really. It wasn't what I needed, all of that. It was just this superficial, instant gratification that it never satisfied me long term. In the moment, I was very happy, being high, partying, having sex, getting in fights. I was happy. But overall, I was very sad, and I felt like I had squandered a lot of my potential. In high school and in college, those years are very formative to who you become later on in life. And when you squander all of that, or you deviate from your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, you're paying a toll. So you end up paying a toll that you'll end up paying for probably a large chunk of your life. And in my case, the toll that I had to pay is still something that I deal with to this day. Now, granted, it's not as bad as it used to be, but I've had to play a lot of catching up for all the things I missed out on in just the span of maybe 5 years. And I'm still learning today. I'm very happy with where I'm at in life right now. Of course, there are still things that I want to do. And I think that as a healthy person, you should always be aspiring to learn, to grow, to be the best possible version of yourself, which is honestly unattainable because you can always be better the next day after. But yeah, this is all to say that selling drugs and being a deviant, it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. I have a lot of stories that I can talk about, and some of them are interesting, some of them are funny, some of them are scary, but overall, I would never recommend it.